Today we're going to be discussing the Little Rock Nine. And to understand the Little Rock Nine, we have to understand Brown versus Board. And to understand Brown versus Board, we had to understand Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson was a Supreme Court ruling which constitutionally decided that segregation was okay on the grounds that if there is segregation, they could be separate but equal. However, Brown versus Board, which involved the school board of Topeka, Kansas, decided that separate was not equal and that these white schools were receiving the vast majority of funds. So I said we're going to be talking about the Little Rock Nine, so a lot of people probably would assume who know about the Little Rock Nine that this was the first desegregation in the South. However, that's not correct. But you would be right by assuming that Arkansas was the first state in the former Confederacy to desegregate. But it was in a little town called Charleston, Arkansas, in West Arkansas, which was largely white and had a very small black population. The city could no longer afford to keep up the black school, and they were having to bus the black children an extra 20 miles to Fort Smith, Arkansas, to go to school every day. So for 3 weeks at the beginning of the school year in 1954, they added 11 kids to the white school in Charleston secretly. And they was able to keep that secret for about 3 weeks before news got out, but they was able to successfully integrate those kids. But it was because they had a complete lack of funding and they could not afford a black school for such a small amount of black kids. Shortly after that same school year, Fayetteville, Arkansas began to slowly integrate their school system too. So now we're going to see, how did the Little Rock Nine start? In May 1955, the Little Rock School Board adopted a plan to integrate their school system. This integration was to start at Central High School in Little Rock in 1957. This plan allowed for kids to move from any school where their race was the majority to where their race would be the minority, knowing that white people would not transfer their kids to a black school. So who was chose to be a part of this integration process? Although many students attempted to be a part of the school and enroll in Central High School, by the beginning of the school year, 9 were enrolled and ready to start school. This group included Minnie Jean Brown, Elizabeth Eckford, Ernest Green, Thelma Mothershed, Melba Patillo, Gloria Ray, Terrence Roberts, Jefferson Thomas, and Carlotta Wells. Going to school. So what was it like to get started? 8 students arrived on the first day together, but Elizabeth Eckford, her family didn't have a phone. So she was able to get the call about the carpool situation, so she ended up coming to the school by herself. They were met by a huge mob of angry white people. Elizabeth Eckford later recalled that she was walking through the crowd trying to find a friendly face, and she found this old white woman. And she said she looked like a kind woman, so she was looking her in her eye, thinking, okay, this woman will help me if something happens. But she turned and looked away, and by the time she looked back, the old white woman spit in her face. Once the students reached the door, they were blocked by the Arkansas National Guard, who was sent there by Orville Faubus, the governor of Arkansas. They had to abandon their attempt to go to the school, and they retreated and went home. After staying home for 2 weeks, then returning to school, the 9 found a more violent mob when they came back. This mob chased and beat black reporters, and after being blocked from entering, around lunchtime, they was able to make it inside the school. However, the mob was still a problem. President Eisenhower had to send in the 101st Airborne to disperse the crowd and to protect the school, where they had to stay for the remainder of the school year. So they finally get inside, and it don't get any easier from there. Once inside the school, the kids were harassed daily. Although they made a handful of white friends, the students were kicked, beat, and Melba Patillo had acid thrown in her face. Gloria Ray was pushed down a flight of stairs, and her mother was fired from her job for not pulling her daughter out of the school. So what happened to the Little Rock Nine? Well, 8 of them was able to finish the school year. The 9th one, Minnie Jean Brown, was expelled because while being harassed by white students, she verbally responded to a white girl and dumped her lunch tray with chili on 2 white boys. The rest of the 8 remained at the school until the end of the year, but had to transfer and finish school at different schools after that because Orville Faubus halted the integration process. Ernest Green, who was a senior in the 1957-58 school year, was the only one to graduate from Central High School. Dr. Martin Luther King attended his graduation. As far as I can tell from my research, all but one of the Little Rock Nine is still alive to this day, with that exception being Jefferson Thomas, who died in 2010 at the age of 67 years old. Although this didn't lead to immediate results, these brave teens laid the groundwork for the integration process to happen later on.